3 weeks into her contract at Obsidian Dynamics, Elara had settled into a routine that still felt surreal. Each morning, she and Lyra would take the elevator to the top floor, where Corinne would greet them with a warm smile and often a cup of coffee for Elara. The small conference room adjacent to Ethan's office had been transformed into a functional workspace, complete with a portable crib for Lyra's naps. The financial reconciliation project was challenging, but engaging, exactly the kind of work Elara had excelled at before Lyra's birth had derailed her career plans. The discrepancies she'd been hired to investigate were subtle but significant. Consistent patterns of small financial aberrations that individually meant little but collectively suggested something more troubling. "These numbers don't add up," Elara murmured to herself, comparing spreadsheets on her dual monitors. Lyra babbled happily from her playmate on the floor, entertained by the colorful toys Corinne had mysteriously produced on Elara's second day. A soft knock interrupted her concentration. Ethan stood at the door, his tie loosened, looking more tired than she'd seen him before. "Making progress?" he asked, entering and immediately crouching down to greet Lyra, who squealed in delight at the attention. The baby had grown inexplicably, attached to Ethan, reaching for him whenever he appeared, a sight that warmed a corner of Elara's heart even as she maintained a cautious distance. "Some," Elara replied, watching their interaction with a mixture of warmth and caution. "But I found something concerning in the Thompson acquisition accounts." Ethan's focus shifted immediately. "Show me." Elara pulled up the relevant files, explaining the pattern she'd discovered. "These variances are too consistent to be accidental. Someone's been systematically siphoning small amounts from multiple accounts, then covering their tracks with adjusted entries." Ethan's expression darkened as he studied the screen. "How much are we talking about?" "About $3 million over the past 18 months, Elara said quietly. "You're sure?" "It's why you hired me, isn't it?" she countered. "To find exactly this kind of thing." A flicker of something, guilt, concern, crossed Ethan's face. "Yes, of course." He straightened, running a hand through his hair. "I need you to prepare a complete report. Don't share this with anyone else yet. Not even Marcus." "Not even your CFO?" Elara asked, surprised. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Especially not Victor. Not until we know more." After he left, Elara sat back, troubled by the exchange. Why would the CEO want to keep potential embezzlement from his chief financial officer unless— "No," she muttered to herself. "Don't go creating conspiracies." But the seed of doubt had been planted. That evening, after putting Lyra to bed in their now considerably more comfortable apartment, thanks to her Obsidian salary, Elara began her own investigation. By midnight, she had compiled a disturbing timeline. The financial discrepancies had begun shortly after Victor Sterling had been appointed CFO, following the unexpected resignation of his predecessor. The next morning, Elara arrived earlier than usual, determined to speak with Ethan before the day's meetings began. She found his office dark, which was unusual. He typically arrived before everyone else. A text notification lit up her phone. "Emergency board meeting. Use the time to finish your report. We'll talk later." The vague message did nothing to ease Elara's growing unease. She settled Lyra in her play area and dove back into the financial records, expanding her search parameters. By lunchtime, her suspicions had solidified into certainty. Someone high up in Obsidian was systematically embezzling funds, and the pattern suggested intimate knowledge of the company's financial oversight systems. Elara was so engrossed in her work that she didn't notice Victor Sterling until he was standing in her doorway, his imposing figure blocking the light. "Vance," he said smoothly. "Hard at work, I see." Elara instinctively minimized her screen. "Mr. Sterling, can I help you?" The CFO's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I understand you've been working on some special project for Ethan. Curious that he didn't involve the finance department. Just some reconciliation for the merger. Elara replied vaguely, her heart racing. Nothing exciting. Victor stepped further into the room, glancing at Lyra, who watched him with solemn eyes. Convenient arrangement you have here. Private office, bringing your child to work. Ethan must think very highly of your skills. The insinuation was clear, and made Elara's cheeks burn with indignation. Mr. Thorne values efficiency, she said stiffly, and I found several issues that needed addressing. I'm sure you have, Victor replied, his tone making it clear he believed something entirely different was going on. Just remember, Ms. Vance, Obsidian was doing fine before you arrived, and it will continue long after your temporary position ends. After he left, Elara sat shaking, both angry and frightened. The confrontation confirmed her suspicions that Victor saw her as a threat, but it also suggested something worse, that others in the company might perceive her special arrangement with Ethan as something inappropriate. She was still processing the encounter when her phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Elara Vance speaking, she answered professionally. Miss Vance, this is Detective Hayes with the Financial Crimes Division. The woman's voice was brisk and official. I understand you're currently employed at Obsidian Dynamics. Elara's blood ran cold. Yes, that's correct. We're investigating some irregularities in Obsidian's accounts. I'd like to ask you a few questions. I'm not sure what I can tell you, Elara stammered, looking anxiously toward Lyra. Perhaps we should continue this conversation at our office, the detective suggested. This afternoon, if possible. By the time Ethan finally returned from his meeting at 3 Sirs, Elara was nearly frantic. She immediately pulled him into his office, closing the door. The police called me, she blurted out. Financial Crimes Division. They want me to come in for questioning, and Victor Sterling was here acting suspicious about what I'm working on. Ethan's face paled. Damn it, he muttered. This is happening faster than I expected. He paced the length of his office, then turned to her with unexpected intensity. Elara, I need to tell you something, and I need you to trust me. Trust you? She echoed incredulously. Ethan, what's going on? Am I being set up for something? No, he said firmly. The opposite. I need to show you something. He unlocked a drawer in his desk and pulled out a thick file. I haven't been entirely honest with you about why I hired you. Elara felt the floor shift beneath her. What do you mean? You weren't randomly assigned to me through a wrong number, Ethan said, his voice low and urgent. I've been investigating internal theft at Obsidian for months. We needed someone from outside the company, someone with no connections to the executive team. So you targeted me. Elara felt sick. Your brother mentioned you months ago. Your skills, your situation. When we needed someone trustworthy, I remembered. Ethan looked genuinely regretful. The wrong number text was genuine. That part was coincidence. But once I realized who you were, I saw an opportunity. You manipulated me, Elara whispered, thinking of Lyra, of how vulnerable they had been. I used your financial situation, your desperation, to give you a legitimate job that you're excellent at, Ethan countered. Yes, I had ulterior motives for hiring you, but not the kind you're thinking. I'm working with the FBI on this, Elara. Victor Sterling isn't just embezzling. He's laundering money through our international divisions. Elara sank into a chair, her mind racing. The detective who called is legitimate, Ethan confirmed. But you need to be careful what you tell her. We don't know who else might be involved. Before Elara could respond, Corinne burst into the office without knocking, something she'd never done before. Ethan, she said, her usual composure shattered. They're here, board security and the police. They're saying... She faltered, looking at Elara with confusion. Saying what, Corinne? Ethan prompted, already moving toward Elara and Lyra. They're saying you've been embezzling funds. They have a warrant for your arrest and they specifically mentioned Miss Vance as an accomplice. Elara clutched Lyra to her chest, a cold wave of terror washing over her. "This can't be happening." Ethan's face hardened as he made a swift decision. "Corinne, use the private elevator. Get Elara and Lyra out of the building now. Take them to the safe house." "The safe house?" Elara repeated, feeling as though she'd stumbled into some bizarre thriller movie. "Ethan, I can't just—" "Elara!" he interrupted, gripping her shoulders and looking directly into her eyes. "Listen to me carefully. Victor knows you found evidence against him. He's trying to frame us both. If you stay here, they'll separate you from Lyra while you're being questioned." The thought of being separated from her daughter was enough to galvanize Elara into action. She quickly gathered Lyra's things while Corinne collected the files from Elara's desk. "What about you?" Elara asked Ethan as they moved toward a hidden door behind his bookcase. "I'll handle this," he said grimly. "I have allies on the board. Just stay safe until I contact you." He hesitated, then added more softly, "I'm sorry for not being completely honest, but I swear everything else, the way I feel about you and Lyra, that's been real." Before Elara could process his words, Corinne was guiding her through the hidden passage to a private elevator, leaving Ethan to face the approaching storm alone. The safe house turned out to be a modest but comfortable apartment in a secure building across town. Elara paced the living room, a whirlwind of fear and confusion. Lyra, finally asleep in the portable crib Corinne had somehow procured along, with diapers, formula, and other essentials, was the only calm point in Elara's universe. "You seem very prepared for this," Elara observed, watching the older woman efficiently arrange supplies in the kitchen. Corinne's normally pleasant expression was serious. "Ethan has always been careful. When the discrepancies first appeared 6 months ago, he knew something was wrong." "So, all of this was planned?" Elara asked, struggling to reconcile her feelings of betrayal with the evidence that Ethan had been working to expose corruption, not perpetrate it. "Not all of it," Corinne replied, her expression softening. "Finding you was genuine coincidence, but Ethan recognized an opportunity when he saw it. Someone with the skills we needed, with no connections to Victor's network." "But why not just go to the authorities from the beginning?" "He did," Corinne said, "but Victor has powerful friends. The first investigation was quietly closed due to lack of evidence." She handed Elara a cup of tea, its warmth doing little to soothe her frayed nerves. Ethan needed irrefutable proof before moving forward again, "which I found." Elara realized the gravity of her discovery hitting her anew. "Which you found," Corinne confirmed. Elara sank onto the couch, overwhelmed. "And now I'm hiding in a safe house like some character in a thriller while Ethan is possibly being arrested for crimes he didn't commit." "Ethan can take care of himself," Corinne assured her, though worry lines creased her forehead. "He's been preparing for this confrontation for months." Hours passed with no word. Elara tried to distract herself by reviewing the files Corinne had saved, looking for anything that might help Ethan's case. Around midnight, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Are you safe?" "Yes," she typed back cautiously. "Is this—" "It's me," came the reply. "Had to ditch my regular phone. Police took my devices but released me for now. Victor's, playing this carefully, making it look like he's the one who discovered the embezzlement." "What happens now?" Elara asked, her fingers flying across the screen. "Now we use what you found. My contact at the FBI is meeting us tomorrow, 10 Tiwaku a.m. Elara stared at the message. "Us, if you're willing. You found the evidence. You can explain it better than anyone." Elara glanced at Lyra, sleeping peacefully, unaware of the chaos surrounding them. By agreeing to meet with the FBI, she'd be stepping directly into a dangerous situation, potentially making herself a target. The sensible thing would be to take Lyra and disappear. She had enough money saved now to start fresh somewhere. But Running would mean Victor Sterling and his accomplices might escape justice. It would mean abandoning Ethan after he'd put himself at risk trying to do the right thing. Despite his deception about how they met, everything else, the job, the accommodations for Lyra, the respect for her work, had been genuine. "I'll be there," she replied. The next morning, after Corinne arrived to watch Lyra, Elara met Ethan at a nondescript office building downtown. He looked exhausted, but managed a relieved smile when he saw her. "You came," he said simply. "I almost didn't," Elara admitted. "Part of me still thinks this is crazy." "It is crazy," Ethan agreed, guiding her inside with a gentle hand at her back. "But it's also necessary." The FBI agent, a sharp-eyed woman named Hayes, listened intently as Elara walked through her findings, explaining in detail how the embezzlement scheme worked and how it had been disguised. "This is exactly what we needed," Agent Hayes said when Elara finished. "Clear evidence of both embezzlement and money laundering." She turned to Ethan. "The board meeting scheduled for this afternoon. Victor will be there." Ethan nodded. "Along with the board members who've been protecting him. They're planning to formally accuse me and vote me out." "Perfect," Hayes smiled thinly. "We'll be ready." The plan was straightforward but risky. Ethan would attend the board meeting as expected. Elara would wait with the FBI team in an adjacent room, ready to present her evidence once Victor made his accusations. The timing would be crucial. They needed Victor to explicitly lie to the board with federal agents present. As they prepared to leave for Obsidian Dynamics, Ethan pulled Elara aside. "If this goes wrong," he said quietly, "Corinne has instructions to get you and Lyra out of the country. There's an account set up in your name with enough to start over." Elara stared at him, stunned by the extent of his contingency planning. "It won't come to that," she said with more confidence than she felt. "Just in case," Ethan insisted, pressing a small envelope into her hand. "And Elara, thank you for trusting me, even after everything." The board meeting began precisely at 3. Elara watched through a monitor in the next room as Victor Sterling stood to address the gathered executives, his face a mask of regretful duty. "It pains me to present these findings," he began, distributing folders to each board member. "But the evidence is clear. Ethan Thorne, with the assistance of an outside accomplice named Elara Vance, has been systematically diverting company funds to offshore accounts." Elara felt sick hearing her name spoken with such calculated malice. On screen, Ethan remained impressively calm. "That's a serious accusation, Victor," he said evenly. "I assume you have proof." "The proof is in front of you," Victor replied smoothly. "Financial records don't lie." "No, they don't," Ethan agreed, "which is why I'd like to introduce some additional evidence." He nodded toward the door, the signal they'd arranged. Agent Hayes opened the door and Elara entered the boardroom with 2 FBI agents flanking her. The shock on Victor's face was momentarily satisfying before it transformed into calculated composure. "Miss Vance," he said coldly, "how convenient. Here to defend your benefactor." "Actually," Elara replied, her voice firm, "I'm here to explain how you've been stealing from Obsidian for the past 18 months. For the next 30 minutes, Elara walked the board through her findings, methodically dismantling Victor's false narrative while the FBI agents distributed her report. She explained how Victor had created a sophisticated system of small diversions, hidden accounting adjustments, and falsified reconciliations to mask the theft of millions. "The pattern begins precisely 3 weeks after Mr. Sterling became CFO," Elara concluded, her gaze unwavering, "and the money trail leads directly to shell companies where he's the beneficial owner." Victor's face had grown increasingly pale as she spoke. When she finished, he glanced toward the door, clearly calculating his chances of escape. "Don't," Agent Hayes warned, noting his gaze. "The building is secured." What happened next occurred so quickly that Elara would later struggle to recall the sequence. Victor lunged across the table toward her, something metallic flashing in his hand. Ethan moved without hesitation, placing himself between them. There was a moment of chaotic struggle, shouts from the agents, and then Victor was on the floor, restrained. "Ethan!" Elara cried, seeing blood spreading across his shirt. "It's just a scratch," he assured her, though his grimace belied his words. "Though I might need a new shirt for the rest of this meeting." 3 hours later, after Victor and 2 board members had been taken into custody, after statements had been given and wounds treated, Elara sat with Ethan in his office. Corinne had brought Lyra, who was contentedly exploring a new stuffed elephant, while the adults processed the day's events. "So, what happens now?" Elara asked, watching Ethan gingerly adjust the bandage on his arm. "Professionally, damage control. The company will survive this, though the merger might be delayed." He hesitated. "Personally, that depends on you." "On me?" Ethan met her gaze directly. "Your contract has 2 months left, but I'd like to offer you a permanent position, head of internal audit, reporting directly to the board for independence." Elara blinked in surprise. "That's a significant promotion." "You've more than earned it," Ethan said sincerely. "You saw what experienced executives missed or chose to ignore. Obsidian needs someone with your integrity." Elara looked at Lyra, now falling asleep, clutching her elephant. "And the accommodations for Lyra?" "A spot has officially opened in Iwoomk, the company daycare," Ethan replied with a small smile. "Though she's welcome in my office any time." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "Elara, I know how this started wasn't ideal. I manipulated circumstances to get you here, and I'm sorry for that. But everything since, getting to know you, watching you with Lyra, seeing your brilliance in action, that's been the most real thing in my life since I lost Charlotte." Elara felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with the day's adrenaline. "I need time to think," she said honestly. "This has been a lot." "Of course," Ethan agreed immediately. "Take all the time you need." 6 months later, Obsidian Dynamics held its annual holiday party. Elara, now established in her role as head of internal audit, watched with pride as her team received recognition for implementing new financial safeguards. Lyra, now walking, unsteadily, toddled between Elara and Ethan, who had long since moved beyond being just her boss. "Ready for the announcement?" Ethan whispered, taking her hand. Elara nodded, feeling the weight of the engagement ring still new on her finger. They had taken things slowly, building trust deliberately after their unusual beginning. The board already knew about their relationship. Transparency had become Elara's watchword in both her professional and personal life. As Ethan called for attention and shared their news with the gathered employees, Elara reflected on the text message that had started it all. A desperate plea sent to a wrong number that had somehow found exactly the right person. Though she still teased Ethan about his knight in shining armor complex, she couldn't deny that sometimes the most unlikely beginnings led to the most perfect endings. Later that night, as she tucked Lyra into bed in their new home, the 3 of them together at last, Elara whispered a truth that still amazed her. "Sometimes the mistakes we think will break us are actually pointing us toward where we're meant to be."